I, 28F, thought my life was perfect. I had a job I loved, a close circle of friends, and a man who made me feel like the only person in the world. His name was Mark, and after 2 years together, he had become my everything. He was charming, ambitious, and unfailingly kind. When he proposed, it was the easiest yes of my life. Our friends and family were thrilled, especially his mother, Eleanor, who had welcomed me with open arms from the very beginning. She often told me I was the daughter she never had, and I believed her. I truly did. The surprise party was supposed to be a celebration of that perfect life. Mark had told me we were going to a quiet dinner, just the two of us. I remember feeling a little flicker of disappointment, hoping for something more, but I pushed it down. He had been working so hard lately, and a simple, intimate evening sounded lovely. When we walked into the restaurant and I saw the faces of 50 of our closest friends and family shouting, "Surprise!" I burst into happy tears. Mark wrapped his arms around me, kissing the top of my head. He had done it all for me. It was our unofficial engagement party, a chance for everyone to celebrate together. The room was buzzing with joy. People were laughing, hugging me, congratulating Mark. My best friend, Chloe, 28F, was the first one to reach me. She threw her arms around me, squeezing me tight. She had been my rock since we were 5 years old. We had been through everything together, from scraped knees to broken hearts. Seeing her there, her eyes shining with happiness for me, made the moment feel complete. She was my maid of honor, my sister in everything but blood. Everything was golden. The lights were warm, the champagne was flowing, and I was floating on a cloud of pure bliss. Mark was by my side, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, his voice a low rumble that sent shivers down my spine. "Are you happy, my love?" he asked. I looked up at him, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "More than you know," I whispered back. He smiled, that perfect, dazzling smile that had captured my heart on our very first date. He was everything I had ever wanted. The first few hours of the party passed in a blur of toasts and well wishes. My parents were there, beaming with pride. Mark's parents, Eleanor and Robert, were holding court, telling anyone who would listen what a perfect match we were. Eleanor caught my eye from across the room and raised her glass to me, her expression one of pure maternal affection. I felt so lucky, so incredibly blessed. I had not just found the love of my life, I had gained a new family, a family that seemed to adore me as much as I adored them. Then came the moment for speeches. My father went first, his voice thick with emotion as he talked about watching me grow up. He welcomed Mark into the family with a warmth that made my eyes well up again. Then Robert, Mark's father, stood up. He was a man of few words, but his quiet approval meant the world to me. He spoke of Mark's happiness and how glad he was that his son had found someone like me. It was all so perfect. Too perfect, as it turned out. As the applause for Robert's speech died down, Mark stood up, pulling me to my feet with him. He cleared his throat, tapping his glass for attention. The room fell silent, everyone turning to look at us. He began to speak about how he had known from the moment he met me that I was the one. His words were beautiful, poetic even. He spoke of our future, of the home we would build, the children we would raise. I was completely captivated, hanging on his every word, my hand clutched tightly in his. And that's when it happened. In the middle of Mark's heartfelt speech, from the back of the room, a single voice cut through the silence. It was sharp, clear, and filled with a desperate urgency that made my blood run cold. "Don't marry him." The voice belonged to Chloe, my best friend, my maid of honor. The room gasped as one. Every head turned towards her. She was standing near the bar, her face pale, her eyes locked on mine. She looked terrified but resolute. For a moment, nobody moved. The joyful atmosphere of the party shattered into a million pieces. I felt Mark's hand tighten on mine, his fingers digging into my skin. I stared at Chloe, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. It had to be a joke. A terrible, horrible, misplaced joke. But the look on her face was anything but funny. It was a look of pure, unadulterated panic. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. My throat closed up and I started to choke, unable to draw a breath. The room began to spin. Mark was the first to react. He let go of my hand and took a step forward, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "What did you say?" he asked. His charming smile was gone, replaced by a mask of cold fury. Eleanor was on her feet, her face a thundercloud. "Chloe, have you lost your mind?" she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "How dare you ruin this beautiful evening? You must be drunk." Chloe ignored them both. Her gaze never left mine. She took a hesitant step forward, holding her phone up like a shield. "I'm so sorry, Anna," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how else to stop this. You can't marry him. Please, you have to listen to me." I finally found my voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "Chloe, what are you talking about?" I asked. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. This couldn't be real. This had to be a nightmare. Mark stepped between us, blocking my view of her. He turned to me, his expression softening, his eyes pleading. "Anna, honey, she's clearly had too much to drink," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Let's just ignore her. We can deal with this later. This is our night. Don't let her spoil it." He tried to take my hand again, but I pulled away. I couldn't look at him. I could only look at Chloe, my best friend, who was standing there looking like her world was ending. And maybe it was. Maybe ours was. "I'm not drunk," Chloe said, her voice gaining strength. "And I'm not leaving until she sees this." She held her phone out towards me again. "Please, Anna, just look. That's all I'm asking." My own friends were starting to murmur, shifting uncomfortably. Mark's family looked scandalized. Eleanor looked like she was about to physically remove Chloe from the premises. But I had to know. I had to understand why she would do this. Why she would detonate a bomb in the middle of my perfect life. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Show me," I said, my voice barely audible. Mark whipped his head around to look at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Anna, no," he said firmly. "You are not going to humor this ridiculous spectacle. She's trying to cause a scene. She's always been jealous of us." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and sharp. Jealous? Chloe? The woman who had cried with joy when I told her I was engaged? It didn't make any sense. Nothing made any sense. My indecision must have shown on my face because Chloe's expression crumpled. "He's lying, Anna," she pleaded. "He's a liar. Just look at the phone." I felt trapped, caught between the man I loved and the woman who knew me better than anyone. My head was spinning. Who was I supposed to believe? The man who was my future or the friend who was my past? I felt a hand on my arm and looked up to see my mother. Her face was etched with worry. "Maybe you should just see what she has to show you, sweetie," she said quietly, "just to put this all to rest." That was all the encouragement I needed. I pushed past Mark, ignoring his protests. I walked towards Chloe, my legs feeling like lead. The entire room was watching us, holding their collective breath. I felt like I was walking to my own execution. When I reached her, she wordlessly handed me her phone. Her hand was shaking so hard I could barely take it from her. I looked down at the screen, my heart hammering in my chest. And then I saw it. A text message thread. The name at the top was Jessica. The messages underneath made the world fall away. I read the first message, then the second, then the third. My vision blurred. The words swam before my eyes, but their meaning was brutally clear. It was a conversation between Mark and this other woman. They weren't just texts. They were a blueprint for my destruction. They talked about my inheritance, the one my grandmother had left me, the one I was due to receive in 3 months, right after the wedding. They talked about how Mark needed to play the part just a little longer. They talked about a future together, a future built on my money. One text from Jessica read, "Is she still buying the perfect fiancé act?" Mark's reply was a knife in my heart. Hook, line, and sinker. She's so desperate for a fairy tale, she can't see the wolf at the door. Just a few more months, babe. Then we're set for life. Another one from him. Her mother is even more clueless. Eleanor has her wrapped around her little finger. It's almost too easy. The mention of Eleanor made my stomach clench. His mother. The woman who called me her daughter. Was she in on this too? I scrolled up, my hands trembling uncontrollably. There were pictures of Mark and Jessica together, kissing, laughing, looking at each other with a familiarity that spoke of years, not months. They looked like a couple, a real couple. In one photo, she was wearing a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a small key. It was the same necklace I had seen on Mark's dresser, the one he said belonged to his sister. He didn't have a sister. I felt the air leave my lungs in a rush. I choked again, this time on the bile rising in my throat. It was all there. The lies, the manipulation, the cold, calculating cruelty of it all. This wasn't just an affair. This was a long con. A meticulously planned scheme to take everything from me. My money, my trust, my future. My perfect life was a lie. A carefully constructed illusion designed to trap me. And I had walked right into it, smiling and blissfully unaware. I looked up from the phone, my eyes finding Mark across the room. He was watching me, his face a mask of anxiety. When our eyes met, he knew. He saw the truth dawning in my expression. The color drained from his face. He started to walk towards me, his hands outstretched, a desperate plea already forming on his lips. "Anna, let me explain," he began. But I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. I handed the phone back to Chloe, my movements stiff and robotic. I couldn't feel my own body. I was numb, hollowed out. All the love I had felt for him, all the joy and hope for our future, it all curdled into something dark and ugly in the pit of my stomach. It was a poison, and it was spreading through me, burning away everything it touched. The party, the guests, the music, it all faded into a dull roar in the background. There was only the betrayal, vast and bottomless. Eleanor rushed to Mark's side, her arm protectively around him. She glared at me, her eyes spitting fire. "This is absurd," she declared to the room at large. "This is a pathetic, jealous attempt to ruin my son's happiness. Anna, you can't possibly believe this nonsense." Her voice was so confident, so dismissive. But now, after reading those texts, I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. The mention of her name in that thread had not been a mistake. She was part of it. She was the architect of this deception. I finally looked at her, really looked at her. The warm, motherly facade had crumbled, revealing the cold, hard woman beneath. The woman who had conspired with her son to defraud me. The woman who had called me daughter while secretly planning my ruin. A cold, hard clarity washed over me, chasing away the shock and the pain. It was replaced by a single, all-consuming emotion. Rage. A pure, white-hot rage that burned away my tears and steadied my shaking hands. I took a step forward, my voice low and steady when I spoke. It didn't sound like my own. It sounded like the voice of a stranger, someone who had been pushed too far and had nothing left to lose. "Get out," I said. I wasn't looking at Mark or Eleanor. I was speaking to all of them, all of his friends, his family, the people who had come to celebrate a lie. "The party is over. Get out of my life." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. They just stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and morbid curiosity. Then, slowly, my friends started to move towards me. My parents were at my side in an instant, their arms around me, creating a protective barrier. Chloe stood her ground, her chin held high, ready to fight for me. The room began to divide, my people on one side, his on the other. The battle lines had been drawn. Mark made one last, desperate attempt. He pushed past his mother, his face a mess of feigned contrition. "Anna, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "We can talk about this. This is a misunderstanding. I love you. You have to believe me." I looked at him, at the man I thought I knew, the man I had planned to spend my life with. And I felt nothing. The love was gone, burned to ashes. All that was left was a cold, hard stone where my heart used to be. I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound that held no humor. "Love?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "You don't know the meaning of the word. You and your mother, you planned this. You used me." His face fell. He knew he had lost. There was no way to talk his way out of this. The evidence was undeniable. His perfect plan had just blown up in his face in the most public way imaginable. Eleanor, realizing that pleading was futile, switched tactics. Her voice became sharp, accusatory. "After everything we've done for you," she spat, her words dripping with contempt. "We welcomed you into our family, and this is how you repay us? By believing the lies of a jealous little girl?" Her hypocrisy was breathtaking. I looked at her, and for the first time I saw her for what she truly was. A predator, just like her son. I didn't bother to argue with her. There was no point. Instead, I turned to the remaining guests, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. "I want all of you out," I said, my gaze sweeping over Mark's family and friends. "Now." My father stepped forward, his expression grim. "You heard my daughter," he said, his voice a low growl. "Leave." That was all it took. The spell was broken. People started to file out, their faces averted, not wanting to meet my eyes. They left in a quiet, shameful procession, leaving Mark and his mother standing alone in the middle of the room. Mark looked utterly defeated. His shoulders slumped, his handsome face crumpled in on itself. He looked small, pathetic. Eleanor, however, was still defiant. She shot me one last look of pure hatred before grabbing her son's arm and pulling him towards the door. They didn't say another word. They just walked out, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The door closed behind them, and the silence they left behind was deafening. The room was almost empty now. Only my closest friends and family remained. They surrounded me, their faces etched with concern. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering words of comfort in my ear. My father stood guard, his jaw tight with anger. Chloe came to my side, her eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Anna," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." I pulled her into a hug, clinging to her like a lifeline. "You didn't hurt me," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears. "You saved me." And in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, I knew it was true. My perfect fairy tale was a lie, but my friendship with Chloe, that was real. And right now, it was the only thing that mattered. The night ended in a blur. My parents helped clear the room, speaking in hushed tones with the restaurant manager. My friends packed up the gifts and decorations, their movements quiet and somber. It felt like a funeral. And in a way, it was. We were burying the future I thought I was going to have. A future with Mark. A future that had turned out to be nothing but a cruel and elaborate fiction. I sat on a chair in the corner, wrapped in my father's coat, feeling a profound and chilling emptiness. Chloe sat with me, holding my hand, not saying a word. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. She had risked everything for me tonight. She had faced down Mark and his mother, endured the scorn of a room full of people, all to tell me the truth. She had chosen me over being polite, over keeping the peace. She had chosen our friendship over everything else. The depth of her loyalty was a small, warm light in the overwhelming darkness that had consumed me. When we finally left the restaurant, the city streets were quiet. The night air was cool on my hot cheeks. My parents drove me home, the silence in the car thick with unspoken emotions. I knew they were worried about me, but they were also giving me the space I needed to process everything. When we got to my apartment, my mom helped me out of the car. "Do you want us to stay with you tonight?" she asked, her voice gentle. I shook my head. "I need to be alone," I said. "But Chloe is coming over." She nodded, understanding. She squeezed my hand one last time before getting back in the car. I watched them drive away, then turned to face my apartment building. It was the home I had shared with Mark for the last year. Every corner of it was filled with memories of him, of us. The thought of going inside, of seeing his things, of sleeping in the bed we shared, made me feel physically ill. But I had to. I had to face it. This was my home, not his. He was the intruder, the imposter. I would not let him drive me from my own sanctuary. Chloe arrived a few minutes later, carrying a bag filled with ice cream, chocolate, and a bottle of wine. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were clear and focused. She was in protector mode. We went inside, and the moment I stepped through the door, the carefully constructed dam I had built around my emotions began to crack. His jacket was slung over a chair. His shoes were by the door. A picture of us, smiling and happy, sat on the entryway table. It was all a lie. I walked over to the table, picked up the silver frame, and stared at the face of the man I thought I loved. He looked so genuine, so full of adoration. How could I have been so blind? How could I have missed the signs? Had there been any? Or was he just that good of an actor? The questions swirled in my head, making me dizzy. I felt a fresh wave of rage and betrayal wash over me. Without thinking, I threw the picture frame against the wall. It shattered on impact, the sound echoing in the silent apartment. Glass sprayed across the floor, and the smiling faces of our past were torn apart. Chloe didn't flinch. She just walked over, put her arms around me, and held me as I finally broke down. The tears came in a violent storm, racking my body with sobs. I cried for the love I thought I had, for the future I had lost, for the fool I had been. I cried until I was empty, until all that was left was a raw, aching hollow in my chest. Chloe held me through it all, murmuring soothing words, her presence a steady anchor in the tempest of my grief. When the tears finally subsided, we sat on the floor amidst the broken glass, a pint of ice cream between us. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Chloe looked at me, her expression serious. "Now," she said, her voice firm. "We fight back. We don't let him get away with this. We make him pay for what he did to you." Her words resonated with something deep inside me. The part of me that was not broken, the part that was still furious. She was right. This wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a headache and a heavy heart, but also with a strange sense of clarity. The grief was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but the rage had crystallized into a cold, hard purpose. Chloe was right. I couldn't let Mark and Eleanor destroy me. I had to take back my power. I had to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. It was about justice. Chloe had stayed the night, sleeping on the couch. When I emerged from my bedroom, she was already in the kitchen, making coffee. She had also swept up the broken glass from the picture frame. Seeing that small act of care made my eyes well up again, but I blinked the tears away. There would be no more crying. Not yet. Now was the time for action. We sat at the kitchen table, sipping our coffee, the silence comfortable between us. "So, where do we start?" I asked, my voice stronger than it had been the night before. Chloe pulled out her phone and opened the text thread from Jessica. "We start here," she said. "We need to know everything. Who is this woman? How long have they been together? And how did she get involved in this scheme?" She then explained how she had gotten the texts in the first place. It turned out that one of Chloe's colleagues had a cousin who was friends with Jessica. This cousin had overheard Jessica bragging to her friends about her boyfriend, Mark, and how he was about to come into a lot of money by marrying some rich, naive girl. The cousin, feeling a pang of guilt, had confided in Chloe's colleague, who in turn had told Chloe. It was a long shot. But Chloe had managed to get Jessica's number and, through a bit of clever social engineering, had baited her into revealing enough to confirm the story. The final piece was a screenshot Jessica had sent to her friend, complaining about how long Mark was taking, which included the damning conversation. It was a tangled web of connections, but it had led Chloe to the truth. She was bragging about it? I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. The audacity of it was staggering. They weren't just conning me, they were proud of it. They were treating my life, my future, as a joke. Yes, Chloe confirmed, her expression grim. According to my colleague's cousin, Jessica thinks it's all some grand romantic gesture on Mark's part. That he's doing all this for her, so they can have a future together. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. So she's a pawn in this too? I mused. Or is she just as guilty as he is? It doesn't matter, Chloe said, her tone practical. Either way, she's a weakness, and we can use her. Her words were cold, calculating, and exactly what I needed to hear. The old me, the trusting, naive Anna, would have been horrified at the thought of using someone like that. But the old Anna was gone. She had died last night at that party. The woman sitting here now was someone new, someone harder, someone who was not afraid to fight fire with fire. Our first step was to gather more information. The texts were a start, but they were just words on a screen. I needed concrete proof, something undeniable. Something I could use to not only expose Mark, but also to protect myself legally. The mention of my inheritance was the most alarming part. I was due to receive a substantial sum from my grandmother's estate in a few months. It was a life-changing amount of money, enough to secure my future. And it was clear that Mark and his mother had been planning to get their hands on it. I need to check my finances, I said, a sudden urgency gripping me. I need to see if he's already done something. I had given Mark access to some of my accounts. We were getting married after all. I had trusted him completely. The thought of what he might have done with that trust made my stomach churn. I rushed to my laptop, my fingers flying over the keyboard as I logged into my online banking. Chloe stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder, a silent source of support. I scanned my accounts, my heart pounding with dread. At first, everything seemed normal. The balances were what I expected them to be. But then I noticed something. A series of small transfers made over the last 6 months, from my savings account to a credit card I didn't recognize. The amounts were small enough to go unnoticed, a few $100s here and there, but they added up to thousands of dollars. I clicked on the credit card details. The card was in my name. I had never opened this card. He had stolen my identity. Oh my God, I whispered, my voice trembling. He's been stealing from me for months. Chloe leaned in, her eyes scanning the screen. Her breath hitched. This is fraud, Anna, she said, her voice low and serious. This is a crime. We have to go to the police. I nodded, my mind reeling. This was so much worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust. It was a calculated criminal enterprise. But going to the police right away didn't feel right. It felt too soon. They would launch an investigation, and Mark would know. He would cover his tracks. He and Eleanor would lawyer up and paint me as a scorned woman, a hysterical ex-fiancé. They would twist the narrative. No, I needed more. I needed an arsenal. I needed to build a case so airtight that he wouldn't be able to squirm his way out of it. Not yet, I said, a cold determination settling over me. First, I need to play his game. I need to pretend that I don't know anything. Chloe looked at me, her brow furrowed with concern. Anna, are you sure? She asked. Can you do that? Can you face him and pretend that everything is okay? I thought about it for a moment. The idea of looking him in the eye, of smiling at him, of letting him touch me, made my skin crawl. But the thought of him getting away with this was even worse. I have to, I said, my voice firm. I need to get him to incriminate himself. I need to get his mother to do the same. I need to gather every piece of evidence I can find before I make my move. Chloe was silent for a long moment, studying my face. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I'm with you. Whatever you need, I'm here. But you have to be careful. These people are dangerous. They've been lying to you for years. They're capable of anything. I knew she was right, but I was capable of more than they thought. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my trust for naivety. They had underestimated me. And that was going to be their downfall. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Mark. My heart leaped into my throat. I picked it up, my hand shaking slightly. The message read, Anna, my love, please talk to me. Last night was a nightmare. Chloe is a liar. I can explain everything. I love you more than anything. Please don't throw us away. The hypocrisy of his words was breathtaking. He was calling Chloe a liar while he was the one living a double life. He was talking about love while actively plotting to steal from me. The rage flared inside me again, hot and fierce. But I pushed it down, replacing it with a cold, calculated calm. This was my chance, my first move in the game. I took a deep breath and began to type my reply. I'm confused and hurt, Mark. I don't know what to believe. Maybe we can talk later. I need some time. I hit send before I could change my mind. Chloe read the message over my shoulder. Good, she said, her voice approving. Keep him on the hook. Make him think he still has a chance to manipulate you. That was the plan. I would let him think he could talk his way back into my life. I would play the part of the confused, heartbroken fiancé. I would let him and his mother spin their web of lies, and all the while I would be gathering the threads to tie their noose. The next few days were the longest of my life. I had to maintain a facade of normalcy while my world was falling apart. I went to work, smiled at my colleagues, and pretended that everything was fine. But inside, I was a coiled spring of tension and anger. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap into my throat, expecting it to be Mark. He was relentless, sending a constant barrage of texts and voicemails, each one more desperate and cloying than the last. He professed his undying love. He swore that Chloe was lying. He begged me to just give him a chance to explain. I kept my replies short and non-committal, telling him I needed space, that I was too hurt to talk just yet. It was a delicate dance, keeping him close enough to feel he had a chance, but distant enough to make him desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, and I was counting on it. Meanwhile, Chloe and I were working tirelessly behind the scenes. We printed out the bank statements showing the fraudulent transfers. We documented every text message from Jessica that Chloe had. We started a timeline, mapping out Mark's lies against the facts we now knew. The business trips he had taken over the past year, the ones that always seemed to coincide with long weekends, now looked very different. I went back through my credit card statements, the legitimate ones, and found charges for hotels and restaurants in cities he had supposedly visited for work. A quick search of Jessica's social media, which was surprisingly public, showed pictures of her in those same cities, on those same dates. She wasn't in the pictures with him, but the backgrounds were unmistakable. A famous landmark here, a distinctive hotel lobby there. He had been taking her on trips, paid for with my money, while telling me he was in boring meetings. The sheer audacity of it left me breathless. I knew I needed more than just circumstantial evidence. I needed something that would link Mark directly to the financial fraud and the plan to take my inheritance. I needed something that would stand up in court. And that's when I decided to take a huge risk. I hired a private investigator. Chloe knew a guy, a former police detective named Arthur who now ran his own agency. He was discreet, professional, and very, very good at his job. Meeting him was like something out of a movie. We met in a quiet coffee shop on the other side of town. He was an older man with tired eyes that had seen too much. He listened patiently as I laid out the whole sordid story, from the party to the texts to the fraudulent credit card. I showed him the evidence we had gathered so far, He looked through it all, his expression unreadable. When I was finished, he took a long sip of his coffee and looked at me. "He's a classic predator," Arthur said, his voice a low gravel. "Charming, manipulative, and greedy. I've seen 100 guys like him." His words, blunt as they were oddly comforting. He wasn't judging me for being fooled. He was confirming that I was a victim of a very skilled con artist. "What do you need from me?" he asked. I took a deep breath. "I need everything," I said. "I need to know where he goes, who he sees. I need proof of his relationship with this Jessica. And most importantly, I need to find out what he and his mother are planning for my inheritance. I need you to find the smoking gun." Arthur nodded slowly. "It won't be cheap," he warned. I didn't care. My grandmother had left me that money to build a life, to be safe and secure. I would use every penny of it to protect myself from the people who were trying to steal it. "Whatever it takes," I said, my voice firm. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. "All right then," he said. "Let's go to work." While Arthur began his investigation, I had to continue playing my part. I finally agreed to see Mark. I couldn't put it off any longer without raising his suspicions. I chose a neutral location, a public park halfway between my apartment and his parents' house. I needed to be in a place where I could easily walk away if I needed to. I told Chloe where I was going and asked her to call me in 30 minutes with an emergency, so I would have an excuse to leave. Seeing him again was harder than I could have imagined. He was waiting for me on a bench, a bouquet of my favorite flowers in his hand. He looked tired, his eyes red-rimmed. He had clearly been working hard on looking remorseful. When he saw me, he stood up, his face a mask of anxious hope. He tried to hug me, but I sidestepped him, keeping a safe distance between us. His face fell, but he quickly recovered, plastering on a sad smile. "Anna," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for coming. I know how angry you must be." I just looked at him, my expression carefully neutral. "I'm not angry, Mark," I said, my voice cold and flat. "I'm confused. I need you to tell me what's going on." This was my strategy, to play the victim, to make him believe I was just a hurt, confused girl who could still be swayed by his lies. And lie he did. He launched into a long, convoluted story about Jessica. He claimed she was a troubled ex-girlfriend who had become obsessed with him. He said she had fabricated the text messages, that she was trying to sabotage our happiness out of jealousy. He painted himself as the victim, harassed and stalked by a woman who couldn't let go. It was a masterful performance. He even managed to squeeze out a few tears. The old me would have believed him. The old me would have felt sorry for him, would have wrapped her arms around him and told him everything would be okay. But the new me just listened, my mind a cold, clear machine, analyzing his every word, looking for the cracks in his story. And there were plenty. He was vague on details, he contradicted himself, and his timeline of when he had last seen this obsessed ex kept changing. I let him talk, occasionally interjecting with a soft questioning why or how to keep him going. I was a detective, and this was an interrogation. "So you're saying Chloe just happened to be contacted by this woman's friends at the exact same time as our engagement party?" I asked, my tone one of innocent confusion. He nodded eagerly. "Yes. Don't you see? It was all a setup. They planned it together. Chloe has never liked me. She's always been jealous of what we have." He was trying to turn me against my best friend, the one person who had been honest with me. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I let the silence stretch, pretending to consider his words. He watched me, his eyes pleading. "You believe me, don't you?" he asked, his voice a desperate whisper. I looked at him, at his handsome, lying face, and I felt a surge of revulsion, but I kept my expression soft. "I don't know what to believe, Mark," I said, letting a single tear roll down my cheek. I had become a better actor than he was. This is all just so much to take in. Right on cue, my phone rang. It was Chloe. I answered, my voice filled with faux alarm. What? Is she okay? I'll be right there. I hung up and turned to Mark, my face a mask of worry. I have to go, I said. It's my sister. There's been an emergency. He looked disappointed but nodded, trying to look supportive. Of course, he said. Go. We can talk more later. Just please, Anna, don't shut me out. We can get through this. I love you. He tried to kiss me, but I turned my head at the last second and his lips brushed my cheek. It felt like being touched by a snake. I pulled away and walked off without looking back, my heart pounding with a mixture of disgust and triumph. I had survived the first test, and I had learned a valuable lesson. He thought I was weak. He thought I was a fool. And that was my greatest weapon. My next target was Eleanor. If she was in on this, I needed to know for sure. I needed to hear it from her own lips. I decided to call her, pretending to be distraught and seeking her guidance. She had always positioned herself as my confidant, my second mother. It was time to see how deep that deception went. I waited a day after meeting with Mark to let his version of the story percolate. I knew he would have called her immediately, telling her that I was starting to come around. When I called her, I made sure my voice was trembling. Eleanor? I whispered into the phone. It's Anna. Do you have a minute to talk? Her voice was instantly syrupy sweet, dripping with false concern. Anna, my dear, of course. I've been so worried about you. Are you all right? I launched into a performance worthy of an Oscar. I told her how confused I was, how Mark had told me his side of the story about the crazy ex-girlfriend. I cried. I told her I didn't know who to trust. Oh, you poor thing, she cooed, her voice oozing with sympathy. Of course you're confused. That Chloe has put you through such an ordeal. I never trusted that girl. She's always had a jealous streak. She was echoing Mark's lies perfectly. It was clear they had coordinated their stories. This was my chance to push a little harder. It's just the things in those texts, Eleanor, I said, my voice catching. They talked about my inheritance. It felt so real. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Just a fraction of a second, but it was there. A hesitation. When she spoke again, her voice was a little tighter. Anna, you must not let them poison your mind. That woman is a fantasist. She concocted that story to hurt Mark, and she used the one thing she knew would upset you the most. Your grandmother's legacy. It's cruel and manipulative. She was good. Very good. She twisted the truth into a weapon against her son's supposed stalker, all while playing the part of the protective mother. But I wasn't done. I decided to set a trap. You're right, I said, letting my voice fill with a newfound resolve. I shouldn't let them get to me. In fact, I've been thinking, maybe Mark and I should get married sooner. Just go to the courthouse, quietly, to prove to everyone that our love is stronger than these lies. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. A quick wedding would mean faster access to my money. It was exactly what they wanted. But my suggesting it would make it seem like my idea, like I was the one pushing for it. It was the perfect bait. When she finally spoke, her voice was filled with a triumphant, barely concealed glee. Oh, Anna, she gushed. That's a wonderful idea. A testament to your love. Don't you worry about a thing, my dear. I'll help you with all the arrangements. We'll show them all. We'll show them all what true love looks like. Her enthusiasm was sickening. She had taken the bait. Hook, line, and sinker. After I hung up the phone, I had to sit down. My hands were shaking. I had just played a very dangerous game, and I had won the first round. But it had taken a toll on me. The effort of pretending, of lying to their faces, was exhausting. It felt like I was losing a part of myself in the process. But then I thought about what they had tried to do to me, what they were still trying to do. And my resolve hardened once more. I would see this through to the end. I would become whatever I needed to be to expose them. That evening, I got the first report from Arthur. It was delivered in a plain manila envelope, slipped under my door when I was at work. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were photographs. The first few were of Mark going about his day, leaving his parents' house, going to the gym, meeting a friend for lunch. Mundane stuff. But then the pictures changed. He was in a different part of town, in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. He was walking up to a small, unassuming apartment building. And then, there she was. Jessica. She came out of the building to meet him. She was beautiful, in a sharp, edgy way that was the complete opposite of me. She threw her arms around his neck and he kissed her. Not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a deep, passionate kiss. The kind he used to give me. The photos were crystal clear, taken from a distance but with a powerful lens. There was no denying the intimacy between them. They walked down the street, holding hands, laughing. They looked like any other happy couple in love. Arthur's report was concise and to the point. Mark visited this apartment 3 to 4 times a week. He often stayed the night. The apartment was leased in Jessica's name, but Arthur had a source at the utility company who confirmed that the bills were being paid from a bank account in Mark's name. An account I didn't know he had. He wasn't being stalked by an obsessed ex. He was living a double life. I spread the photos out on my coffee table, staring at them until my eyes burned. This was the proof. The undeniable, soul-crushing proof that everything he had told me was a lie. Seeing it in black and white was somehow more painful than reading the texts. The texts were just words. This was his life. His real life. The one he was living behind my back. The one he was funding with my stolen money. I felt a fresh wave of grief wash over me, so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. This was real. It was all real. The man I was supposed to marry was in love with someone else. He had been for years. Our entire relationship, our entire life together, had been a performance, a means to an end. I was not his partner. I was his mark. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the pictures of Mark and Jessica, letting the pain wash over me. It was a necessary pain. I needed to feel it, to let it burn through me so that I could move past it. I needed to mourn the man I thought he was, the love I thought we had, so that I could focus on the man he truly was, a thief, a liar, a con artist. And then another thought occurred to me. A cold, chilling thought. If he was this good at deception, what else was he hiding? The fraudulent credit card was just the beginning. I had a feeling that this went much deeper. I called Arthur. I need you to dig deeper, I said, my voice low and urgent. I need you to look into his finances. All of them. The secret bank account, any other credit cards, any investments. I need to know where all my money has been going. And I need you to look into his mother, Eleanor. I have a feeling she's the one pulling the strings. Arthur didn't ask any questions. He just said, I'm on it. I hung up the phone, a new sense of purpose surging through me. The grief was still there, but it was now overshadowed by a burning desire for justice. They had made a fool of me. They had tried to ruin me. But they had failed. They had woken up a part of me I didn't even know existed. And she was not going to rest until they paid for every single one of their lies. The next week was a strange and surreal dance of deception. I continued to play the part of the wounded but willing fiancé. I let Mark back into my life, slowly. We met for coffee. We took a walk in the park. I even let him come over to my apartment for dinner. Each interaction was a carefully calculated performance. I was pliant, forgiving, letting him believe he was winning me back. He, in turn, was the perfect penitent boyfriend. He was attentive, apologetic for the misunderstanding, and more loving than ever. It was utterly nauseating. During that dinner at my apartment, he talked about our future, about the quick, quiet wedding I had suggested to his mother. He was all for it. I don't need a big party, Anna, he said, taking my hands in his. All I need is you. Let's just get married and put all this ugliness behind us. I looked into his eyes, those beautiful, dishonest eyes, and I smiled. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said, my voice soft. Inside, I was screaming. While I was playing my part, Arthur was working his magic. He was a ghost, digging into the digital and financial lives of Mark and Eleanor without leaving a trace. Every few days, a new envelope would appear under my door. And with each one, the web of their deceit grew larger and more complex. Arthur discovered that Mark had not one, but 3 secret credit cards, all opened using my personal information. The total debt he had racked up in my name was staggering, over $50,000. He had been using them for lavish gifts for Jessica, expensive dinners, weekend getaways. He was living a champagne lifestyle on my credit. But the most damning discovery was yet to come. Arthur managed to gain access to the secret bank account that Mark used to pay the bills for Jessica's apartment. The account was funded by a series of regular transfers from another account, an account that belonged to his mother, Eleanor. This was the proof I needed. She wasn't just aware of the deception. She was actively funding it. She was laundering the money he was subtly siphoning from me and from their own family business, cleaning it before it got to him and Jessica. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that made my blood run cold, came in the form of a series of emails. Arthur, through a source, had managed to get access to Eleanor's email account. And there it was. A thread of messages between Eleanor, Mark, and a lawyer who specialized in prenuptial agreements and asset protection. The emails were dated from 6 months ago, right after we got engaged. In the emails, Eleanor was asking the lawyer for advice on how to structure our finances after the wedding. She was specifically asking about my inheritance. "How can we ensure that my son has access to his wife's assets?" she wrote in one email. "We want to make sure their future is secure and that his business ventures are well funded." The lawyer's reply was chillingly clinical. He laid out a strategy for commingling our assets, for moving my inheritance into joint accounts, for structuring investments in a way that would make it almost impossible for me to reclaim my money in the event of a divorce. It was all there, in black and white. A premeditated, legally backed conspiracy to steal my inheritance. They weren't just planning to take my money. They had hired a professional to help them do it. They were going to use the law itself as a weapon against me. The level of their treachery was beyond anything I could have imagined. This wasn't just a greedy son and his enabling mother. This was a criminal conspiracy. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the evidence. The photos of Mark and Jessica, the fraudulent credit card statements, the bank records showing Eleanor's involvement, and now the emails with the lawyer. I had a mountain of proof, enough to destroy them, enough to send them to jail. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I could go to the police. I could hand over the evidence and let the justice system take its course. It was the logical, sensible thing to do, but it didn't feel like enough. A trial would be long and messy. They would hire expensive lawyers. They would drag my name through the mud. They would try to paint me as the villain. And even if they were found guilty, a prison sentence didn't feel like true justice. It wouldn't repay the emotional devastation they had caused. It wouldn't heal the wounds they had inflicted. No, I needed something more. I needed to confront them. I needed to see the looks on their faces when they realized I knew everything. I needed to take away the one thing they valued more than money: their reputation. Their carefully crafted image of being a perfect, respectable family. I wanted to shatter that illusion in the most public and humiliating way possible. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the shame and betrayal they had made me feel. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. The quick, quiet wedding was their idea, their trap. But I was going to turn it into my stage. I was going to use their own plan against them. I called Eleanor the next day, my voice full of fake excitement. "Eleanor, I've been thinking about our wedding," I said. "And I know we talked about doing something small, but I've had a change of heart. I want to celebrate our love with everyone. I want to have a proper engagement dinner, a big one. at the fanciest restaurant in town. My treat. There was a moment of surprised silence on the other end of the line. This was not part of their plan. A big public event meant more scrutiny, more expense. But for me to be the one offering to pay for it, that was an opportunity she couldn't resist. It was a sign that I was fully back in the fold, that I was ready to open my wallet. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was practically purring. "Anna, my dear, that is the most wonderful idea I have ever heard," she exclaimed. "Of course, we must celebrate. It will be the perfect way to show the world that your love has conquered all. You leave everything to me. I'll handle the guest list. We'll invite everyone. All of our family, all of our friends. It will be a night to remember." "Oh, it will be a night to remember, all right?" I murmured to myself after I hung up the phone. A cold, vengeful smile spread across my face. She was going to gather all the witnesses for me. She was going to set the stage for her own downfall. The trap was set. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment to spring it. The 2 weeks leading up to the engagement dinner were a masterclass in deception. I was the perfect doting fiancé. I went dress shopping with Eleanor, pretending to care about lace and silk. I listened to her endless stories about her son's wonderful qualities, nodding and smiling in all the right places. I let Mark move some more of his things into my apartment, a symbolic gesture of our impending union. He was smug, confident, certain that he had me right where he wanted me. They both were. They had no idea they were walking into an ambush. Behind the scenes, Chloe and I were preparing for war. We compiled all of Arthur's evidence into a devastatingly effective presentation. We scanned the photos, the bank statements, the emails. We created a slideshow, a chronological narrative of their betrayal. Chloe, with her graphic design skills, made it look slick and professional, like a corporate takedown. We also made copies of everything, putting them in sealed envelopes to be handed out at the dinner. We were leaving nothing to chance. The night of the dinner, I felt strangely calm. The anger and the grief were still there, but they had been banked, transformed into a cold, focused energy. I chose my dress with care. A simple, elegant red dress. A color that symbolized both love and war. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Her eyes were hard, her expression determined. The soft, trusting girl was gone for good. I met Mark and his parents at the restaurant. It was a stunning place, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. Eleanor had outdone herself, inviting over 100 people, the cream of their social circle, all the people whose opinions she cared about so much. She greeted me with a warm hug, whispering in my ear, "You look beautiful, my dear. Tonight is the night you truly become one of us." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. The dinner was a lavish affair. The food was exquisite. The wine flowed freely. Mark was by my side, his hand constantly on me, marking his territory. He was in his element, charming the guests, accepting their congratulations, playing the part of the lucky man who had won the heart of a beautiful, wealthy woman. I smiled. I laughed. I played my part. But all the while, I was watching the clock, waiting for the moment. Finally, after the main course had been cleared, Robert, Mark's father, stood up to give the first toast. He was a quiet man, and I had always thought he was decent. Looking at him now, I wondered how much he knew. Was he a willing participant in his wife and son's scheme, or was he just another fool, blinded by his loyalty to them? It didn't matter. He was collateral damage. After Robert, several other friends and family members stood up to offer their well wishes. Each toast was another layer of hypocrisy, another testament to the grand lie we were all celebrating. And then it was Eleanor's turn. She rose to her feet, beaming at the crowd. She gave a long, flowery speech about family, about love, and about how she had known from the moment she met me that I was the perfect woman for her son. She praised my generosity, my kindness, my trusting nature. She was practically canonizing me. It was sickening. When she was finished, the room erupted in applause. She sat down, looking immensely pleased with herself. Then, Mark stood up, pulling me to my feet with him. He was about to give his speech, the one that would seal our engagement. But I stopped him. I put a hand on his chest, my touch gentle but firm. "Actually," I said, my voice clear and steady, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "I'd like to say a few words first." He looked surprised, but he couldn't very well refuse. He smiled a little tightly and gestured for me to go ahead. The room fell silent, all eyes on me. I took a deep breath. "Showtime." I picked up my champagne flute. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate our love," I began, my voice filled with a warmth I did not feel. "And I especially want to thank Eleanor and Robert for welcoming me into their family. Eleanor, you've been like a mother to me, and I've learned so much from you." I paused, letting my words hang in the air. Eleanor was beaming, soaking up the praise. I turned my gaze to Mark. "And Mark, my darling Mark, you've taught me so much about love, about trust, and about the importance of being honest with your partner." His smile widened. He had no idea what was coming. "In fact," I continued, my voice taking on a harder edge, "Mark and I are so committed to honesty that we believe there should be no secrets between us, especially when it comes to money." A few people in the room shifted uncomfortably. The mood was starting to change. Mark's smile faltered. Eleanor's brow furrowed. "Which is why I was so surprised to learn about the secret credit cards," I said, my voice as sweet as poison. "The ones you opened in my name, darling. The ones you've used to rack up over $50,000 in debt." A collective gasp went through the room. Mark's face went white. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I wasn't finished. I turned to Eleanor. "And Eleanor, you've been so helpful with the wedding planning, and with financial planning too. I was so impressed to find out that you had already consulted a lawyer on our behalf to help figure out the best way to manage my inheritance after the wedding. It was so proactive of you." Eleanor looked like she had been slapped. Her face was a mask of pure shock and horror. And then, for the grand finale, I reached for the remote control that Chloe had discreetly placed on the table next to me. "But don't just take my word for it," I said, my voice ringing with a cold, triumphant fury. "I've prepared a little presentation." I pressed the button. A large screen, which had been hidden behind a curtain, descended from the ceiling. And the first image that flashed onto it was a crystal-clear photograph of Mark and Jessica, locked in a passionate kiss. The room erupted. The murmurs turned into loud, shocked exclamations. I clicked the remote again. The next slide was the text message conversation between Mark and Jessica, the one where they mocked me and talked about my money. Then came the fraudulent credit card statements, with the lavish purchases highlighted in red. Then the bank records, showing the flow of money from Eleanor's account to Mark's secret account. And finally, the emails. The damning emails between Eleanor, Mark, and the lawyer, plotting the legal theft of my inheritance. With each click of the remote, another layer of their deception was stripped away, leaving them naked and exposed in front of everyone they knew. I narrated the whole thing, my voice cold and clinical, laying out their entire conspiracy for all to see. The room was in an uproar. People were shouting, pointing, looking at Mark and Eleanor with expressions of pure disgust. Their friends, their family, their entire social circle were witnessing their humiliation in real time. Mark was frozen, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief. He looked like a cornered animal. Eleanor was on her feet, her face contorted with rage. "This is a lie," she shrieked, her voice shrill and desperate. "She's a liar. She's making it all up." But no one was listening to her. The evidence on the screen was undeniable. I walked over to the table where they were sitting. I looked down at Mark, the man who had shattered my heart and tried to ruin my life. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the tablecloth, his whole body trembling. "The engagement is off," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I pulled the diamond ring from my finger, the one he had given me, the one that was probably paid for with my own money. I held it up for a moment, then let it drop into his water glass with a soft plink. Then I turned to Eleanor. She was still sputtering, her face red and blotchy. "And as for you," I said, my voice dripping with contempt, "you are the most despicable woman I have ever met. You called me daughter, and all the while you were plotting to destroy me." She flinched as if I had struck her. I turned back to the room. "For those of you who would like a closer look at the evidence," I announced, "my friend Chloe will be handing out copies on your way out." Chloe, who had been standing by the door, gave me a small, determined nod. She held up a stack of the manila envelopes we had prepared, the final nail in their social coffin. I looked at Mark one last time. He finally raised his head, and his eyes met mine. They were filled with a pathetic, desperate plea. But there was no pity in my heart, only a cold, satisfying sense of justice. "My lawyer will be in touch," I said. And with that, I turned my back on him, on them, on the entire mess they had created. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, leaving them to face the ruin of their own making. The sound of shouting and chaos followed me out the door, and it was the sweetest music I had ever heard. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The story of the disastrous engagement dinner spread like wildfire through their social circle. Mark and Eleanor became pariahs overnight. Friends they had known for decades crossed the street to avoid them. They were uninvited from parties, kicked out of their country club, and shunned by the very people whose approval they craved. Their public humiliation was absolute. But I wasn't content with just social ruin. The day after the dinner, I went to the police, armed with my mountain of evidence and a very expensive, very aggressive lawyer. I filed a report for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The evidence was so overwhelming that the district attorney's office took the case immediately. Warrants were issued for the arrest of both Mark and Eleanor. The news of their arrest was the talk of the town. Their mugshots were splashed across the local news website. Seeing them stripped of their fine clothes and their arrogant smiles, looking small and pathetic in grainy black and white, gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. This was the reality they had tried so hard to hide. They were not pillars of the community. They were common criminals. The legal battle was long and draining, but I was relentless. I had the truth on my side, and I had the resources to see it through. Arthur's investigation had been so thorough that their defense had nothing to stand on. They tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that I was a vindictive ex-fiancé trying to ruin them. But the documents didn't lie. The emails, the bank statements, the credit card bills, they all told the same story. A story of greed, deception, and a breathtaking sense of entitlement. Jessica, the other woman, was initially hostile. But when my lawyer showed her the evidence that Mark had been lying to her as well, that he had been using her just as he had been using me, her attitude changed. She realized she was just another pawn in his and his mother's game. Faced with the possibility of being charged as an accomplice, she agreed to testify against them. Her testimony was the final nail in their coffin. She told the court how Mark had promised her a future, how he had described me as a necessary evil, a cash machine he had to tolerate until my inheritance came through. In the end, the jury took less than 3 hours to find them both guilty on all charges. Mark was sentenced to 5 years in prison for fraud and identity theft. Eleanor, as the mastermind of the financial conspiracy, received a sentence of 7 years. The judge, in his sentencing, called their actions a callous and calculated betrayal of trust, motivated by pure greed. He said they had preyed on my kindness and affection, and that their lack of remorse was appalling. Watching them being led away in handcuffs, their faces pale and drawn, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a quiet sense of closure. It was over. Justice had been served. They had lost everything: their freedom, their reputation, their money. My lawyer had filed a civil suit against them as well, and the court had awarded me a judgment that would strip them of every last asset they had. I would get my stolen money back, and then some. The weeks and months after the trial were a time of healing and rebuilding. I had to untangle the financial mess Mark had created, closing fraudulent accounts and repairing my credit. It was a tedious and frustrating process, but with each account I closed, I felt a little piece of my life being reclaimed. I sold the apartment we had shared, purging my life of the last physical remnants of him. I found a new place, a bright, sunny apartment that was all my own. My friends and family were my salvation during this time. They rallied around me, offering their unwavering support. My parents were my rocks, their quiet strength a constant source of comfort. And Chloe, my incredible, brave Chloe. She had been by my side through every step of this nightmare. We spent countless nights talking, crying, and eventually laughing again. Our bond, which had always been strong, was now forged in fire. She had saved my life, in more ways than one. One evening, about a year after the trial, Chloe and I were having dinner at my new apartment. We were celebrating the final settlement of the civil suit. I had received a check that morning that covered all of my losses and legal fees. It was a tangible symbol of my victory. As we sat there, sipping wine and looking out at the city lights, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. "How are you doing?" Chloe asked, her voice soft. "Really doing?" I thought about it for a moment. The scars were still there. The betrayal had left a permanent mark on me. I knew I would never be the same naive, trusting person I was before. I would always be a little more cautious, a little more guarded. But I wasn't broken. I was stronger. I had faced the worst kind of deception, and I had not only survived, but I had triumphed. "I'm good," I said, and I realized it was the truth. I'm really good. I had my friends, my family, my career. I had my independence, and I had my self-respect. I had learned a hard lesson about the darkness that can hide behind a charming smile. But I had also learned about the incredible power of friendship, of truth, and of my own resilience. A few days later, I received a letter. It was from Robert, Mark's father. I almost threw it away, but my curiosity got the better of me. I opened it with trepidation. The letter was short and filled with a clumsy, heartfelt remorse. He apologized for his son's and his wife's actions. He said he had been blind, that he had trusted them too much, and had failed to see the truth. He said he was selling the family home to pay for the legal fees and the restitution he now owed me. He was losing everything because of their greed. He didn't ask for my forgiveness. He just wanted me to know that he was sorry. I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't feel anger towards him, only a quiet pity. He was another victim of their lies, in his own way. His life had been destroyed too. It was a stark reminder that the ripples of their deception had spread far and wide, leaving a trail of wreckage in their wake. My life moved on. I focused on my work, and my career flourished. I traveled. I reconnected with old friends. I learned to trust again, slowly and carefully. The memory of Mark and Eleanor faded, becoming a cautionary tale, a dark chapter in a book that was still being written. The anger and the pain were replaced by a quiet strength, a deep and abiding gratitude for the people in my life who were real, who were true. Sometimes I would think about that night at the party, the moment when Chloe's voice cut through the noise. It was the moment my world broke apart. But it was also the moment I was saved. She had given me the truth, a bitter and painful gift, but one that had ultimately set me free. He wanted to take everything from me. He wanted to leave me with nothing but debt and a broken heart. In the end, the only thing he took was my silence. And in its place, he left a woman who had found her voice and who would never, ever be silenced again.